What if I told you that some of the earliest medical devices were not only strange but downright dangerous? From electric shocks to radioactive water, the history of medicine is filled with bizarre, shocking, and deadly inventions. Could a simple electric shock cure disease? Or how about drinking water with radioactive elements for better health? And why did doctors think drilling into your skull could heal mental disorders? In this video, we're diving into the most mind-blowing medical devices ever invented. Tools that were once seen as breakthroughs, but in hindsight, were terrifying missteps. Hold tight, because these inventions will leave you questioning how far we've come in the world of medicine. Let's start with something that's shocking. Literally. Electricity has always fascinated scientists, and in the late 1800s, it was believed to hold the power to cure disease. Have you ever heard of the Electrotherapy Machine? This device was designed to deliver electric shocks to patients suffering from ailments like paralysis, depression, or even hysteria. Doctors would hook patients up to these machines, sending electrical currents through their bodies, hoping the jolts would somehow reset their nervous systems. The practice quickly gained popularity, but the problem was they had no idea what they were doing. Often, patients were left with burns, muscle damage, or worse, but electrotherapy continued to be used in various forms well into the 20th century. Imagine sitting in a chair, strapped in, as the doctor flips a switch, sending volts of electricity coursing through your veins. Today, electrotherapy is seen as primitive, but it was once hailed as cutting edge. So, could electric shocks cure your illness? Spoiler, it didn't work, and many patients suffered in the process. Next on our list is the iron lung, a giant metal machine that resembled something straight out of a sci-fi movie. But for polio patients in the early 20th century, this device was a lifeline. Quite literally, polio was a devastating disease that could paralyze the muscles used for breathing. To keep patients alive, they were placed inside this enormous mechanical respirator. The iron lung would regulate the air pressure inside the chamber, forcing their lungs to inflate and deflate. Imagine spending days, weeks, or even years confined inside this cold metal tube, unable to move or escape. The iron lung worked, but it was a grim solution to a horrifying problem. Thankfully, modern ventilators have rendered this machine obsolete, but it remains a haunting reminder of a dark time in medical history. Now let's talk about something even more gruesome: trepanning. If you thought getting a root canal was bad, imagine having a hole drilled into your skull while you were awake. Trepanning is one of the oldest surgical procedures, dating back thousands of years, and was used to treat everything from headaches to mental illness. The theory? That drilling a hole in the skull would release evil spirits or relieve pressure on the brain. What's even more shocking is that people survived this procedure. However, the risk of infection or permanent brain damage was incredibly high. Today, trepanning is considered an archaic, barbaric practice, but for centuries it was seen as a legitimate medical treatment. If you thought today's health trends were wild, wait until you hear about radium water. Yes, radioactive water marketed as a miracle health elixir. In the early 20th century, radium was all the rage. People believed that ingesting small doses of radioactive elements could boost vitality, cure ailments, and even slow aging. Manufacturers sold radium-laced water bottles, and the wealthy would gulp down the glowing liquid without a second thought. But the reality? Prolonged exposure to radium led to radiation poisoning, causing severe health issues like bone decay, organ failure, and death. One famous victim was Eben Byers, a socialite who drank so much radium water that his bones literally crumbled. The so-called miracle cure turned out to be one of the deadliest fads in medical history. Next, let's take a step back in time to an era when doctors believed that illnesses were caused by an imbalance in the body's fluids, or humors. The solution? Bloodletting, draining blood from the patient to restore balance. This wasn't done by a simple cut. Special bloodletting devices were used, including lancets and even a multi-bladed tool called a scarificator, which could make several cuts at once. Some devices even looked like medieval torture instruments. For centuries, bloodletting was the go-to treatment for almost any illness. from fevers to infections. The truth? Bloodletting did more harm than good, often leaving patients weak, anemic, and more likely to die from their original ailment. The idea that mental illness could be cured by altering the brain led to one of the most controversial procedures in medical history, the lobotomy. In the 1930s, Dr. Walter Freeman developed a tool called the leucotome, designed to cut the connections between the frontal lobes of the brain. Freeman would insert the tool through the patient's eye socket, severing nerves in a gruesome procedure that left many patients in a vegetative state. The lobotomy was seen as a last resort treatment for severe mental illness, but was soon overused for conditions like depression and anxiety. Though some patients showed improvement, most were left permanently disabled, and the procedure was eventually abandoned. The lobotomy is now regarded as a dark chapter in the history of psychiatry. Finally, let's talk about an early tool for tooth extraction that looks more like something from a pirate's toolkit than a dentist's office: the tooth key. This device, resembling a corkscrew, was twisted into the patient's mouth, clamped around the tooth, and forcefully wrenched out. In an era before anesthesia, you can imagine how excruciating this was. Patients would often scream in agony as the dentist pulled, sometimes breaking the tooth or even part of the jaw in the process. The tooth key was eventually replaced by more modern tools, but it remains a chilling reminder of how far dental practices have come. Medicine has made incredible advancements, but looking back, it's hard to believe the strange and dangerous tools that were once considered revolutionary. From electricity to radioactive water, and from bloodletting to lobotomies, these bizarre inventions remind us that progress often comes at a price. As shocking as these devices were, they paved the way for the modern, safer practices we have today. If you found these wild medical inventions as mind-blowing as we did, make sure to like this video, share it with your friends, and hit that subscribe button for more fascinating dives into the weird history of medicine.